welcome back to the Empowered Intuitive Academy podcast. I am one of your hosts, Tayla Henderson, also known as the Kynoch Witch, and with me is my beautiful co-host, Petra Costa from When Magic Awakes. And today we are chatting about energetic androgyny, discussing the divine masculine and feminine. Now, we got to start this episode with a bit of a disclaimer. This might ruffle some feathers. Our feathers were definitely ruffled and plucked in all the wrong ways reading this topic. It's very loaded because it ties into other overarching societal, biological topics that can only be condensed down into such a tiny little package in this podcast episode. And mixing that in with spirituality is always a good way to make the waters even muddier. So let's start with a definition of what is divine, masculine, and feminine. Petra.
Okay, you would think that's an easy question, but it isn't. So I can only give you a really short one that I came up with. And just everyone remembering, I'm not making these definitions up. I'm searching for the data. So there is no bias here from me. But the divine masculine and the divine feminine are archetypes representing of energies we all have within us. So it's a very broad-based thing, and it goes off the view that every energetic being has a complement of the two, of the divine feminine and the divine masculine. And the way to find harmony in your life is to find a balance between the two. Simple.
Simple.
Simple, we say. Simple, we say. But it's not so simple, because when you start looking into it, and I'm just going to put my own disclaimer on here. I'm moving political correctness out of my vocabulary right at this moment in time, because I want to actually talk about some of the things that we're not allowed to talk about, because, you know, society is creating some boundaries of what we're allowed to speak about. So when I'm talking about this kind of stuff, I'm not talking about how it's often about how it's viewed and how historically it's been represented, and how through religions and mythology it's been represented. So people just need to bear that in mind when we get further into the discussion.
Yeah.
But what I found so polarizing right from the very get-go was when you get a brief definition of the differences. Like, how do you define and set it out in a table, the difference between feminine and masculine? Or, as they like to say, also yin and yang.
Yin and yang, yes.
What have you got, Taylor? I know what I've got.
So I really
take a breath, everybody. This is not the opinions of the hosts.
No,
this is
what we found on in the shit that is available on the internet, and the publications that have been made on these topics.
Yes.
And
let's go.
If you don't agree with all of them, you'll probably know. So the traits which ultimately define what divine masculine and feminine is really stereotypical to the gender. And I think the main thing is that the physical gender being represented by these energetic divine archetypes is really going to come into play. So again, if it's not something you ascribe to, please note we're not bagging it. So divine masculine, often associated with action, logic, intellect, extrovertedness. They're seen to be like the light side, the sun, expressionism, physical strengths and
physicality,
leadership qualities and things like that. The divine feminine is more empathetic, creative, nurturing, protective, intuitive, introverted, but then it also says passive, and I fucking hate that.
Oh,
Ew.
oh God.
because
And look,
women are
I really
has
react to that too.
yeah.
I really badly react to that. Like, it's funny. I have in the yin and yang that I've got in front of me, it's, masculine is associated with day, feminine is associated with night.
Yeah.
I'm all for that. I don't have any issue there. Sun and the moon, no problem. Logical, intuitive, all right.
Yeah.
Hard and soft, all right. Like, what, I understand, of course, when we're talking about yin and yang specifically, it's not just talking. It is so much more than talking about feminine and masculine. And unfortunately, when we've new aged it, we've tried to bundle it in because we've gone, oh, that's the symbol of the. It's not. It's a
Yeah.
symbol of opposites and balance.
Yeah.
That's what it's supposed to be. So obviously, it's going to list all of these traits off.
And the yin and yang in traditional Taoist culture is actually talking about like the landscapes and nature and the cosmos and how these seemingly masculine, feminine aspects are interplaying with each other in the landscape.
Exactly. And we've taken bits of it and gone, oh yeah, it's feminine, masculine. That's one very, very small, very, very small part of it. What I can't get my head around is the giving and receiving. Like, I know the giving and receiving relates to certain activities.
It sounds
I get
like the
I
old
get that.
body missionary position. That's what that sounds like to me.
Like, I get it, but yes, boys have a penis, girls have a vagina. Like, I get it. I watched Kindergarten Cop, right? So I
Know
get
about
it.
the birds and the bees, all right?
We know,
We know
got
we're
that.
old enough with
But
children. We know what happens.
what I don't get there, and I understand it conceptually what they're trying to embrace there, but what I find that, and again, this is where you get specific and you one word gets stuck in your head. Giving. We grow, it sounds terrible, but we grow babies in us. We grow them in us
Yeah.
and we give of our own bodies for them to create them.
Mm.
Like,
Yeah.
that is like the definition of giving.
Mm.
I'm not saying the guy didn't do his part, right?
But
No,
it's
I'm not
so
saying that. It's not osmosis.
embarrassing
We
to
don't create. We're not Sheldon,
no.
right? We can't just whoop and
Yeah, yeah.
but it's sort of like the definition of giving, and I sort of like that one really irks me. And I think the reason it irks me more is the modern association to the words giving and receiving.
Mm.
I think that's more like, I don't know. Did you have any feelings about that? Because I felt really strongly. That really bugged me.
The only thing that I really sort of like, well, I feel like we're constantly giving. As women, we are constantly giving. We're giving our energy, we're giving our time, we're sacrificing a lot of ourselves when we mother children, when we climb the corporate ladder, when we're trying to do things for the community. And I think it's associated with that nurturing aspect of the divine feminine, like we're and that motherly figure. We're always being the perfect epitome of feminine is within that motherly figure. And what irks me about that is not all women are mothers, not all, and they can give in so many more ways than just having children, and they can mother in many more ways than having children.
Yeah.
And it cancels out our young women as well as our older women and the women transitioning to that part in their lives as well, our margas. Like,
Mm.
where are their traits of femininity within that archetype?
Yes.
And I guess the word is archetypes. There are so many various archetypes for feminine energy as well as masculine energy that you can't really just narrow it down to masculine and feminine, because you can have a warrior as a man and you can have a warrior
Warrior
as a
goddess,
woman.
and you can have a
You
nurturing.
can have a paternal father figure who is totally devoted to his children, and you can have a mother who is, on par in the same. Like,
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
archetypes are, they can't be narrowed down to just man, woman, masculine, feminine. We embody them all in our own individualistic ways. And so I think just trying to, uh, I understand that it's been done that way so that we can understand those aspects of ourselves. And I understand, within myself, there are a lot of masculine traits that I have. I like logic. I like to, be extroverted in my creativity and stuff. I like action. I like when things get done. I like to be involved. But my feminine probably be more overrides in that I am intuitive, I am creative, I am a nurturer, I'm very protective, but men are protective too. So there's a crossover. It's a lot more fluid than we think it is. And to just say that we're 50-50, I mean, I get it, the universe likes its little binary standards and whatnot, but even that's like fluid as fuck. That was a bit of a tangent and a rant,
No,
but
I love it. I love it because exactly the thing. It's almost, this is where being PC and also different views on it are tainting the understanding of the message by putting this masculine and feminine as viewing it as a gender, because it's sort of kind of not. If we just remove it to the side and say, look, let's not talk gender per se, let's talk traits, and we're just going to give them a name and they're masculine and feminine. That's fine. That makes it easy for your brain to understand, right? That makes it easier for me to go, yeah, because I've got I was out there with my dad. I was doing all the hard work. I've got the shoulders of a bloody wharfie. I think I've got a fair bit of, masculine energy going on. But by the same token, as soon as my kids were born, it was like, oh, okay, yeah, I get it. But there are guys, it feels like this argument is starting to try to cancel it out, so that if I make the comment to say, I really felt the feminine energy when I had my children, it's like I'm trying to discount the fact that my husband didn't feel the same nurturing, protective things towards the children that I did. It's not what I'm saying at all. Like, that is literally not what I'm saying. It's just like, for want of a better way to describe it, we've given it the word feminine and masculine and attributed things to it. But it's really not male and female. Do you know what I mean?
I know what you mean, but it's and honestly, I think the hardest part about it is trying to separate it from the physical grounding in the gender, because that's what's tangible for us. That's what we can relate to. And I just think of how those definitions of divine masculine and feminine have evolved over our human history. Going right back to paleo, where we had more egalitarian societies, which meant men and women did things equally. Yes, they had strengths and weaknesses, but they used those and worked together to survive. Yes, women had children, but they still hunted, be it small game, be it large game. They had community to take care of their children. Men still crafted, men still gathered. It wasn't so narrowed down. They, and people were just more honored for what they could contribute and what their strengths were, and working with others, and compensating for the weaknesses and whatnot. Whereas we lead on into antiquity and we start to get this real, especially in the agricultural, we start to get this real binary with what masculine and feminine it is. You look at the big pantheons, the top deities are always manly men, and they've got, they're ripped as shit, and they've got the wild 80s romance novel hair, and the women, like you said, they've always got these really robust motherly figures, and they're ripe with child and all that sort of thing, and they're, and the goddesses are always relating back to the earth, and creating bounty and stuff. And I mean, physiologically, that's not unreasonable to relate back to, because women give birth. We would have magically seemed to just take this seed from a man and make it into something out of nothing, literally. And so it was the best comparison that they had. But then that type of we get this type of sort of patriarchal takeover, and we see this in the mythologies and we see this in the societies where we're no longer being put on the same playing field. Like we're sort of like our traits and things are not being honored just because, you know, like women are strong and whatever, like we've got warrior women and stuff. We're now being put in this box of femininity where we are passive, where we are submissive, where we are solely mothers, daughters, sisters, and we can be no more than that because it, you know, like that type of the roles, you know, being solidified then goes into those mythologies, and those mythologies become warped, and then we get those definitions for divine feminine and masculine from that. So the divine masculine and feminine is really what I think I'm trying to say is a reflection of how our society's gender roles have influenced our spiritual thinking over our human history. Does that
That's deep. That makes so much sense, but it's also very deep. And it also like it
yeah,
suggests a lot of, and I'm going to go out and say it, of where we started to go wrong.
yeah,
Like it suggests a lot if you look at the mythology and the stories. Like when I was researching the mythologies for my oracle deck,
yeah,
it shocked me that most of the women's portrayals, rather than they were only strong as the result of adversity, whether it was being raped and being thrown out of the household by their father, brother, a male dominating figure in their household,
yeah,
and that they may have then risen above that. And usually when they did rise above that, if they rose and if they made those people pay for what had been done to them, they were then the dark goddess.
yes, yes,
They were then, whereas a male god goes to war and corrects injustices, he's a bright shining light and a hero. And this is not my interpretation. This is the mythology in both the Greek and the Roman pantheon are full of this, and it is really difficult. But you brought a good point, and I'm going to have to touch on it. I'm going to have to address the elephant in the room. Sorry, everybody. Sorry, not soz. Actually, there's a lot of reasons why there are differences, right? People are starting to get to this point where that gender bias doesn't exist. We're trying to level out things. Everything a man can do, a woman can do, and vice versa, and blah 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 blah. There are physiological differences, and we obviously men are taller, stronger, more robust, just because of the type of growth hormone and sex hormones they have going
the
through their body.
biology behind,
The,
yeah,
the
yeah,
biology is pretty straightforward. Um, what I didn't know, and I found interesting, and everybody else probably already knows this, is that the default when a baby starts growing in utero is, like where else would it grow, is feminine. And then when the baby gets flooded by testosterone, that's when it actually starts morphing and changing. And even at that point, size is shifting, its weight's shifting, everything's shifting in that body, and then it works through its life. Um, so there is biological, physiological differences between male and female, which makes us more attuned to doing certain work.
mm,
So it makes sense to me when we look back in our communities when we were hunting small game, when we were gathering what was just close by, that there was not much of a divide, right? There was not much going on because we all did our bit. We all had it was a shared
yeah,
community, a
yeah,
shared culture. But then, agricultural revolution came along and we started to actually farm. And
yeah,
when you start putting it into the fact that the whole community and the whole sector was broken down, not by so much one human needed to do a little bit of everything. It was like you had one section that were doing all of that and one section doing all of that. Obviously, a really strong guy is going to be able to do more out in the farm and out in the garden and what needs to be done. There's some things, especially when they didn't even you couldn't even afford to have an ox or an animal to pull these things. Now, we all watch the movies and we see the woman just strapping on your harness and just helping getting that plow through and all this kind of stuff. But the reality is, if you had two people there to do the job, the guy would be able to get the job done quicker because he's stronger.
Yeah.
That's just a simple fact.
Yeah.
People can want to argue with that, that all they want with me, but that's just a statistical
I'm not
fact.
saying the woman can't do it.
Not saying that.
Can very well go and plow her field herself. We're quite capable. It's just that,
if you've got two of us,
if there's someone there who's more capable and strong, like it's gonna get the job done easier or quicker. That logically,
it's logic. Why would you do anything else? Tay, I'm more than capable to get the tomato sauce container down from the top of my pantry. Right? I just go and get a chair and I step on the chair and I grab it. I can get that down.
Yeah.
But if my son's in the room, I'd be an idiot if I said, oh, I'm not going to do that because I'm more than capable. What am I going to do? What's anyone going to do? Hey, tall boy, can you come over here and get down the tomato sauce?
What that tells me? You are just being your sovereign self in your sovereign feminine and telling that boy to get his mama some sauce from the cupboard.
You want to eat dinner tonight? Get the sauce out of the cupboard.
Yeah. Get the sauce out of the cupboard, please.
And that's just a logical allocation of resource, which I think a lot of this did come from a logical, and it was when we had these amazing revolutions, whether it was an agricultural or whatever the other one was, we have all of these things. It has created more of that shift because we're not just one family or one community doing a little bit. We had bigger ideas. We had a grander way of doing it. Why have everyone just having a small allotment when one farmer can make enough potatoes for the whole community and we can sell them to other clans and blah, blah, blah. So it made perfect sense why all that have occurred.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, that was when the weight started to shift about what was valued and what wasn't valued.
Yes.
And that is a cultural thing.
Yeah.
That's got nothing to do with the divine masculine and feminine. No. What I do want to also state, and I've had this article that I've read is huge. It's from Stanford Medicine from their university program, and it talks about the actual differences in the brain of male and female. There is a size difference. A guy's brain is larger than a female brain, which okay, they've got bigger bodies, they've got bigger heads. Of course, they've got a bigger brain. Otherwise, they're going to have a lot of
proportionately accurate.
Yeah. Exactly. When you then when they adjust them for size, the natural size difference because of our anatomy difference, and they analyze them, there are other differences. Okay, so it isn't just about the size of the brain. It also goes into there is difference in terms of the hippocampus and the size of the hippocampus and how the amygdala. It's also different size and shape. And what they did was some studies where they actually showed people traumatic video, really, really traumatic video of things that would activate emotion. And when they studied this under an MRI and under, with all of the different ways they've got to monitor the human brain, the male brain and the female brain reacted differently.
Yeah.
So, and what the main difference was how it impacted the amygdala. And I can't remember which way it was. I didn't write that down, but I'll find it for you in a minute. Basically, it was left and right was the difference. That one was the left side that was activated, one was the right side was activated, which was indicating, and what they've concluded from that is that women process it on a more emotional level, and men process it on more of a action level. What can they do? Analyzing it, looking at it analytically.
Yeah.
Now, we also know that studies have shown that, we had this debate, and I've seen it so many things on TikTok and people getting into huge arguments about this, that guys are more analytical than women are. They have more spatial reasoning than women do. And women are more emotionally mature.
Mm-hmm.
And we have more ability to recognize faces and to read body language and in a social setting.
Yeah.
Now that's going to cause a lot of debate amongst people because they go, "Oh, Petra, you're just full of shit once again because my husband can't read a map and he can't do this. So where's his spatial reasoning?" Look, dudes, this is the whole thing. This is not. It's not a one size fits all here.
No.
We're just saying when you look at the data, there is a notable difference between the two.
Yeah.
Now, that's just a couple of the differences. There's also a difference in the amount of grey matter and white matter, and whether women use a little bit more of the grey matter. Or actually, I think it's the white matter. That's also, it causes it's a different shift in the brains.
Yeah.
And there is supposed to be more back chat between the left and the right side of the brain. So there's more communication between the two sides of the brain. So the actual part that joins the two together actually is thicker in women than it is in men. Now, there's heaps of research around this. What is also out there, which surprised me, shocked me, and horrified me, was the amount of scientific data that is trying to dispute this. Because what they're saying is the variance is so small between the two. The notable variance is so small, it's not worth even talking about, because when you look at the majority, it's very similar in the patterns that how it works. And then these are just outliers, so you should ignore them from the data because of how statistical analysis works. I even saw women scientists completely debunking the different studies that have come out recently, noting these differences, even though the measurable difference between a male and a female when it comes to spatial awareness and their ability to understand space in that regard, it starts at 2 to 3 months. So
yeah.
but the amount of scientists come out and say, "Oh, we're talking in the 1 or 2%." Well, it's only 1 or 2% of genetic
They
coding.
even did these studies on like animals and primates and things just to cover their basis to say that no, this is not a cultural thing. This is actually biology at work within, the two genders.
Absolutely. Like they actually studied rhesus monkeys, and when they studied the rhesus monkeys, they found that the male monkeys preferred to play with toys that had wheels on, and the female monkeys preferred to play with plush toys.
Yeah.
Now, there's no cultural bias in the rhesus monkeys. They haven't got a preference for blue and pink. They haven't got a preference for those things, but it was shown quite clearly
Yeah.
that was the ones they go with, which is in line with what is happening with when you put them in front of male and female children.
Yeah.
When you're looking at them from being 9 to 17 months, they're
Yeah.
responding the same way as the rhesus monkeys are. So the reason they did it on monkeys, obviously we're not monkeys. I'm aware of the fact that we're not monkeys, but they were trying to do the study to remove cultural bias. Because unless you lock a kid in a cage, you're not going to, and feed it through a little thing, you're going to have some interaction, and there can be bias creeping in. But they also studied on rats.
Yeah.
And rats are really interesting because not only with rats do they do not test on female rats. I didn't realize female rats get a free pass. And the reasons the scientists don't want to test female rats is because the hormonal changes in their body of being in the cyclical nature that they are expected to adversely impact results.
Right.
So we're going back, even rats where their crazy wandering wombs are causing them all sorts of fucking trouble. But in this one, it gives them a free pass.
Yeah.
So the hysterical being that is the female rat is excluded. But in this instance, they tested them, and they tested the female rat because she showed such strong signs of nurturing and protection of her young and protection of her nest. And the same parts of the brain that flare up in humans is a part of the brain that flares up in rats.
Yeah.
And when they tampered with that part of the rat brain, that the rat no longer wanted to care for her young, nor did she protect her nest.
Right. That's interesting, isn't it?
It's interesting and horrifying at the same time, because I think it's more comforting to think that this is not hardwired. Like I like to think it's part of my soul.
Yeah.
that makes me want to look after my kids and care for my kids.
Yeah.
But there might be a good portion of it's biologically
Well,
imperative.
yeah, there's a definite biological programming with with the reproductive processes and brain chemistry and neural activity and whatever that's suggesting that we are more hardwired to be nurturing towards our young and things that look like our young, like that literal study with the monkeys and the plush toys, and and we are that's why we see things as cute, why things are cute
Yes.
and adorable to us, because we're picking up on that stimulus within our brains to say this is something that's vulnerable and needs our care and needs our nurturing and stuff like that. Like it comes from that infant response. That's why we love puppies and kittens and things.
Oh, and like even Walt Disney knew this way back in the
Yeah,
day,
yeah,
and he knew to draw his animals with oversized eyes,
yeah.
because when we see an oversized eye, we attribute it to a young baby that needs protecting.
Babies.
So
Yeah,
we are automatically, so they know that you'll very rarely, if you see something with a smaller eye, they don't want you to feel empathy towards it. And you see a character drawing and out with a larger eye, it's
yeah,
because they want you to feel you empathize toward it and feel nurturing.
yeah,
It's how there, unfortunately, some of this stuff is how we are just programmed.
yeah.
Um, and people don't like the concept that it is brain programming and biology here.
Mm.
And again, I keep coming back to this, but it seems to me like humans have a real problem of wanting to control everything. And it's even like a control bias here that we just think, oh, I'm
Yeah,
more than my biology.
yeah.
Well, are you? Because I'm pretty confident you don't take a crap in the morning, you're going to get sick pretty quick. So you're not controlling that, people.
There is a level of canceling out our own mundane existence and the mundane existence of others for the sake of this, like being more divine or being something that we're just inherently not. I get wanting to better yourself and understand yourself a bit better through studying these energetic archetypes and concepts, but
Yep.
when we're utilizing these concepts to warp our perceptions of other people and societies and how we exist in the world, that isn't healthy or beneficial. That's what I have issue with when it comes to this stuff. And unfortunately, we throw New Age under the bus quite a fair bit with this, but we're seeing a lot of that in.
Oh, I'm horrified in terms of a movement, for want of a better word, that clearly acknowledges that getting a balance is the way to spiritual harmony, enlightenment, whatever.
Yeah,
Most of the stuff that I've seen, actually, it's a 60-40 mix. So
yeah,
whatever you feel more drawn to is going to be a 60, and then you got to get 40.
yeah,
And then if you don't have that, you become the wounded feminine or the wounded masculine, because you've gotten it all out of whack.
yeah,
And again, I don't like the concept that it makes it that if you're not, if you're really in touch with your feminine or really in touch with your masculine, it indicates you're broken. And
yeah.
I don't like that, because sure, you don't want anyone going out there and being, so their action turns to aggression,
Yeah.
or their willingness to resolve conflict turns into submission.
Mm.
Right? You don't want that. But to say that it's just got to be this hard, what happens if you're just a blokey bloke and you're pretty freaking spot on wonderful the way you are?
Yeah.
Like, what happens if that's the case? Don't be telling people you're broken, and then in the same note of telling people that they need to be balanced in between the two to get the yin and yang balance, the masculine feminine balance,
I
and all of this,
yeah.
those particular people will host or will only put forward the one view. So
Yeah,
their view
and I
will
think
be,
that's what I'm sort of getting stuck on. Like, I mean, I'm very comfortable in my feminine or my expression of the feminine anyway. I would liken myself to a bit more of a dark feminine, which is, low key, don't give a fuck, we'll tear your face off if you piss me off or rub me the wrong way. but then
No.
snake, get away. But like I here's what I contemplate a lot. I go to a women's circle. I connect with other women. I am a woman. I connect with the feminine. I understand the masculine from a very basic point of view and how I interact with other people who are masculine around me, be that men or more masculine women, or who however you express and flow between those lines. But I would love to be a fly on the wall at a men's gathering to truly understand what healthy masculine is to them. Like,
Yes.
that inside scoop. So then I can turn around and be like, oh, that's how that's how I might embody that.
Yes.
I really like that. Maybe I can balance myself out in that way if I see fit. If I don't, that's fine. But I've got more of an understanding. Like,
yeah.
Whereas, and like you said, we see it in a lot of, posts and videos and things. It's mainly women talking about being the divine feminine, which that's fine. There are lots of things that are women centric that women can only understand about those elements. Same with men being masculine centered. Like, that's men's business and women's business. It's a thing that's been going since the dawn of time as well. We understand equally that there are things that are only intrinsic to our beings. And I think it's more I think it transcends the physiological being, and then where you get into that, extra sensory being. In that energy of divine masculine and feminine. But I would like to know the inside scoop. And I read a book recently that I really loved called The Flowering Wand, which was a study of the natural divine masculine, and it talked about different deities and things like Dionysus and Pan and stuff, who are deemed the wild gods because they live out in nature, they love a good libation or two, they're promiscuous, and but they're artisans. And
are you saying they bang everything that moves?
They bang everything that moves, like praise Fascinus, praise Dionysus. But they're proud of their erection. They don't give a shit. They're manly men, but they're also very flamboyant in their expression. And reading that book and understanding that connection and that side of the masculine, like, that's something that I relate to as well in my own being. And so I think, like, it's not so narrow as we try to make it out to be.
Exactly.
I would love more insights like that when it comes to actually understanding that concept of masculine
I absolutely
and
agree.
From the patriarchal point of view of masculine.
Look,
I think the other side of it too is that where we cross into that toxicity type of thing.
And that's not what we're trying to do here at all. But I think everyone could do well to be a little bit more open to the masculine and feminine within themselves. And I think it would do New Age a hell of a lot of good if I can understand where a woman feels that it's not her right or her place to talk about the divine masculine. I sort of can understand it a little bit, but if I've got 40% of it running through me,
I want to know more about it.
Maybe I have got the right, but then there is a thing called collaboration.
Yeah.
And I just feel like we need to reintroduce this back into the spiritual place here.
We need a more egalitarian approach.
Yeah, just talk to the men in your life or talk to the women in your life and see how their viewpoints on this differ from yours.
Yeah.
And actually listen and hear it.
Yeah.
Listen and hear it and don't put it through a lens per se. It's easier said than done.
Easier said than done.
But every single one of these, when I was Googling divine feminine or divine masculine, the masculines were all coming from websites and places that were only focused on the masculine.
Yeah.
And then the feminine was only focused on goddesses and the female spirit and abundance and all of that kind of stuff. So it was all very much Okay.
Yeah.
And and this has come through from religions, this comes through from terminology, this comes through from almost we like we haven't talked about some of the iconology, but obviously there's the thought process that feminine is very earth, it's about abundance. So, Mother Earth, we've got, Mother Earth and Father Sky or Father Sun
Yeah.
that sits above, etc. And those two together make a perfect harmony and produce
And it's
life.
funny because those sort of like mythological archetypes come from our creation stories, where
Yeah.
the prominent examples of this interplay between masculine and feminine energies occurs. And it's something that I looked into like leading up to this. So in across all cultures and laws, there is usually a symbolic mother father energy. And then funnily enough, there's also this little intermediary energy that comes in. So I feel like that's
Yes.
where the androgyny and the bridging between the two comes into play. And so in Greek mythology, we have Gaia and Uranus, Gaia being the earth goddess, Uranus being the sky god, but we also have Rhea and Kronos, which are the Titans. Um,
Yes.
and Rhea birthed the Titans before the gods Gaia and Uranus and that came through, and then Kronos, who ate all his children.
Chom, chom, chom.
Chom chom. But and we got Egypt with Nut and Geb. So Nut is actually the sky goddess, and she gives birth and swallows the sun every day, and that's how they, the first primordial days came to be. And Geb was her support, so he was the earth underneath her. And
Yes.
there's also a god in the middle of them that would support them and hold them and act as this like axis mundi in between. In Babylon, we have a bit of a different mythology. We have Tiamat, which is a primordial serpentine dragon goddess, and she was swollen with the creations of the world, the monsters, the men, and all of the beings, and she birthed them all into the primordial waters. And an epithet for her is Tahom, which means the deep, which is often associated with the ocean. So we get like
Yep.
this primordial ocean coming into play with creation.
Yep.
And then in China, you've got yin and yang, which comes from the Taoist concept of feminine and masculine, but you've also got this androgynous being called Pan Ku. And he actually was birthed from a cosmic egg made up of these masculine, feminine, sun, moon, earth, water, fire, air elements. And when he hatched, he then created everything else. So I found that kind of fascinating. And then in Fiji, there is Turakara. So she is a hawk goddess who laid two eggs. One hatched a male and one hatched a female. Get this, a serpent deity called Dagdi taught them to survive, make fire, talk, and cook. So who does that sound like?
How does that sound like?
We
Isn't it amazing how there's just so much connection? Oh, it's always the serpent that comes on, and often the serpent's giving knowledge.
Well, my next one, the Hindu creation myth, we've got Narayana, which the name Narayana translates to water vessel. Also an epithet for Vishnu, a creator god. Now, Narayana lays on a serpent in the primordial waters and births a god called Brahma, who blooms from a lotus which emerges from the navel. So that just says pregnancy and childbirth to me.
Yeah.
Now, even though Narayana is supposed to be a male. So I'm like, that's clearly a woman description with an epithet of a god. But then you've got the serpent in there, Ananta, who they're lying upon. So again, we've got these primordial waters, this serpentine energy coming through, various fluidity between the masculine and feminine elements of this creation. And a few of the associations are switching as well. So male,
Yep.
sky, woman being earth, and then swapping.
Yes. And Josh, I've got to stop you there. Not many people realize that.
Yeah.
Most people instantly, if you talk about it, because we've all watched, Da Vinci codes and all of those kind of stuff when it goes through the iconology, and we've got sun god worship and we've got all of this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
people automatically assume sun is masculine, da da da. But there are other cultures that have it
There are
reversed.
feminine, there are feminine gods, goddesses, that deities that are attributed to the sun. So
Yeah,
Amaterasu is a sun goddess in Japan.
yeah,
You've got the Native Americans, I believe, also see the sun
yeah,
as a feminine energy.
yeah.
And a lot of Aboriginal people as well see the sun as a feminine energy. And we also have the primordial snake as well, the rainbow serpent, which brings things into dreaming. And then relating back to sort of our little example before with the snake again, we get the Adam and Eve mythology, but we have
Mm,
Adam and Lilith first, which are born from, which God creates. Now, God, we know him as a he, but
mhm.
really, if God is in everything and everyone, he's more androgynous in
Yeah.
his energy, in that universal energy. The common thing that I took out of these creation stories is that there is a presence of two energies that complement each other to create life. And the way I see that in a sort of more evolutionary scientific sense is I look at like comets and planetoids, because comets have like I call them the sperm of the universe. They have all like the minerals and the microbes and things that
Yeah,
needed to create life. And then you've got the planetoid, which is in the dark vast womb of the universe, acting as this like ovum. And then when they collide, literally, that is how planets have been birthed. And so
yeah.
in our creation stories, we have likened this to our own physical genders. And then these are really the basis of where we're drawing our divine feminine and masculine presences from in spiritual sort of teachings. So that's a bit of a wormhole, but
No, I
that
love the
look at,
wormhole, and one thing I took from all of what you said,
yeah,
apart from the fact is, why always a snake? Like, why is it
I
so?
always a snake. Yeah, yeah,
Why is it always a snake? Because I automatically, when I was thinking about it, thought, it's called a trouser snake for a reason.
yeah,
Snake would be defined more as the masculine, but if it actually isn't,
yeah.
it's usually attributed to the feminine. There was
It's
a
more
whole
attributed to the feminine. Yeah,
way before Christianity came around and named the serpent in its origins.
yeah,
Way back before that, there was a whole sects of religion that went after serpents as being a female
yeah.
um, icon.
So you look
Um,
at the Minoan culture. The Minoans literally worshipped serpents and held serpents in their hands, the priestesses.
yes.
Yeah,
Like some of the theories behind it is that anything that's got a cyclical nature, which obviously snakes do have in terms of the fact that they need to shed their
yes,
skin
yeah,
and they go through a pattern, as does the moon go through a pattern. It's cyclical.
yeah,
That is where it's attributed to women, because women with cycles, it makes sense.
yeah, yeah.
So there, I did see that.
And that leads into like symbols we associate with the man and masculine and feminine. So like
I
masculine,
got to,
yep, train,
yeah, masculine,
yep, feminine.
feminine.
And we're again relating it back to genitalia. So how can we
It is. I
describe these energetics to physical being? Masculine, you've got phallic figures, you've got the wand, the sword, the sun, Mars being the god of war, being
or
more
yeah.
an embodiment of those supposedly masculine traits. Anything horned and antlered,
Yeah, a horned god.
yes, the
I
horned
love a horned
god.
god.
He's the consort of the great earth goddess, and
Yeah,
within witchcraft and Wicca. And he's often a sub note because a lot of it is feminine based, but he's very much present all the same. And then you've got spears, conches, and you've got things for the goddess like cups, chalices,
it's-
mortars, and pestles. Cowrie shells are a really old one, and shells just in particular. And again, that can really be come back to that primordial water, ocean origin creation
yeah.
mythology.
And in that regard, is the women is like a receptacle. So I can understand that's where it is
Yeah,
receiving, because we're more the cup, we're more Or hold. So
hold the waters for
yeah,
life.
yeah.
Venus being the planetary associated energy for the feminine. So, which, taking on the more of the traits of the goddess and less of the planet, because if you compare the planet to the feminine, that I think that's probably more me. Like Venus is acidic and hostile.
So
So we've got like that
go
dark,
down into it from the chemistry
like
perspective.
feminine
That's so great.
energy, with the Earth being like our nurturing, life-giving side, and our sister planet Venus being like, I will fucking burn you. I will burn you
I
to
will burn your
the
skin
ground.
off.
Yeah,
I will.
yeah.
I will turn your bones to
I will
char.
spit acid in your face. Like that's Venus. And I am.
Oh,
I'm
funny.
but
You know what I love? It was one thing you said that really touched something inside
touched
me when
it
we
in
talk. I
yeah,
don't even know how to say it, but when we were talking about balancing this, I've been struggling with this concept because I don't like the idea of cancelling out it either and then choosing one over the other and having to find this like balance between yourself and all that kind of stuff.
yeah,
I loved how you mentioned there's often an intermediary.
yeah,
There's often something that is the epitome of seeing it from both sides, from that little thing that whatever Eros, he was a god that didn't have was androgynous in his way. So
yes,
many of the Greek and Roman pantheon were androgynous. I
yes,
love the idea of talking about the axis mundi in relation to that.
yeah,
And that perhaps it's not just about finding balance. Perhaps it's about activating that axis mundi center within us
yeah.
to listen to both sides,
To connect them. Yeah,
to connect them. So what we're
to bridge that gap.
exactly. So rather than it being about finding it within you or like, activating it, it's just listening to it because perhaps we just have it there, but we've just shut down some of the channels of communication. And it's just the fact of having this listen to allow the intermediary to
Yeah,
do its job.
yeah.
I think I can resonate with that. That I can work with.
I'm glad you vibe. I'm glad you're vibing.
I do because I don't like the idea of trying to cancel anything out. I don't believe that. I think cancel culture has been given enough freaking power. It can literally just blow itself up now. Thank you very much. I love the idea of it actually being about listening and accessing that, and it's more about connectivity
Yeah.
rather
But we
than
don't have to live in that place. We don't have to reside there. We can come and go as we please.
no, exactly. And even if it is I'm seeing it more in my mind as not as a place. I've already pictured it in my brain as being like the central thing that connects the left and right hemisphere of my
Literally,
brain, and it just that's what
literally.
I'm seeing it more as.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
love that. I can live with that.
yeah.
I'm
That
happier.
seems like, yeah, that seems like the way to think it, really. Yeah,
That's given me a place where before this was really, really alienating me quite a bit
yeah.
because I'm just like, there's good and bad in everything. There's yin and yang and everything, but it doesn't necessarily have to be attributed to male and female.
No.
It can, and
And I
good and bad.
think
It's not such a simple thing.
the powerful part in that thinking is that we, no matter how you ascribe, no matter how you identify, we can all access,
Yes.
access that knowing and access that energy and that way of being when we want, simply by finding ways to connect connect and
Yes.
having.
Yeah. I love it. I can live with that.
Yeah,
I can embrace that.
same.
Um, one thing I wanted to point out, I brushed over it before, and it is an important part. And it goes back to physiology. Say
Physiological
it for me. Good. Of
theology.
the brains. Yeah, it goes back it goes back to the neuroscience of the brain. And when we talk about the neuroscience of the brain, just quickly to touch on it, because the human brain does work slightly differently in how we process,
Mm,
women are more prone to depression and anxiety.
mm,
That is just a simple fact. And men are also more prone to um, addictions, whether it be drug and alcohol addictions,
mm.
and also autism. Now, I'll put a caveat on autism because it presents completely differently in a male and a female.
Yeah.
And we're only starting to understand how it presents in a
We touched
female.
on that heaps in our last podcast episode. So if you
Yeah.
go back
So,
and listen to that, that's your invitation to do so.
yeah, but I do think it's very interesting to note that you can see where anxiety and depression, if you were more prone to feeling emotion and reading emotion, where anxiety and depression would become something that you have issue with.
Yeah.
It also makes sense to me if I'm if analytics are how my brain is its base processing,
Yeah.
it would also make sense to me that autism would be something that would get triggered, because I'm trying to process at a higher level.
Yeah.
You know, let's not that I'm trying to process at a higher level. I can understand that, and also this is where dyslexia can also come in, which is I think 10 times more prevalent in males than it is in females.
Yeah.
So that would go down to the fact that I don't think that's cultural. I find it hard to believe that those things are cultural. But I just find that interesting. And yeah,
Yeah.
I think when we understand where it's coming from, we'd be better able to understand how to help others.
Yeah. And I think too, in that there's not a one size shoe fits all in those scenarios, because we're both quite, where everyone is quite capable of, you know, exhibiting, having those things. It's, you're not just limited to gender wise, but it is definitely linked to how our brains work as a species within the biology of that. And
Yep.
yeah, so
Yep.
yeah,
And something we
I
said in
think,
our,
you
sorry,
know,
go.
sorry, like it just, you know, it just brings up a good point that if you're, you know, you're a woman who might not be as emotive as all the women next to you, that's fine. I think, well, often or not, we end up in these states of distress because we're feeling like we should be a certain way, outlined by these stereotypes, by these archetypes and whatever. And
Yep.
then when we're not fitting that mold, we distress ourselves trying to fit into that mold and trying to be someone we're not, essentially, instead of exploring our inner selves and getting to know those parts of ourselves a little bit more, or maybe
Yep.
figuring out how, you know, how we are actually responding to those stimuluses and those triggers and things, you know.
Yep.
That, you know, being a woman and being more analytical towards certain things, that's fine, you know. You can dig deep with that just as much as if you are a man and you feel you're more emotional than the men next to you. That's not a fault. If anything, that's a strength to explore.
Thank you. That's what we, if anything gets taken from this podcast, I hope what people take from it is stop trying to attribute fault or blame.
Mm.
One thing I have to make mention of this, that I got really angered by when I saw a lot of the divine feminine masculine debate, is that all of the world's problems we're having at the moment is due to masculine energy having tipped the scales in the wrong direction, where there's war and there's this and there's that and the other.
Mm.
Well, I hear what you're saying. I hear what people are saying, but to try to use something, this kind of concept, to attribute blame
Mm.
and to attribute fault is probably the wrong way to go about it. Saying, can we stop blaming each other for it? Can we stop? There's been shit in the past. We understand that. We were talking about it at the start when we're doing our pre-talk, where we said, I'm trying to beat someone at their own game.
Mm.
How about you don't try to beat someone at their own game? How about you try to change the game? Like,
Mm.
if you think the game is loaded to always, the house is always going to win,
Yeah.
change the nature of the game rather than, do you know what I mean? I
Yes.
don't know what I'm saying. I'm like, just rather than, it's very easy to blame someone and point
Lines up
fingers.
with what I just said about trying to conform into, you know,
Exactly.
predefined.
Authenticity is,
Yeah, yeah. So, I mean, I read a really brilliant book recently about a woman. And look, I'm speaking from the perspective of a woman because I am a woman. But, and this is how I sort of navigate my realm. So, this is what comes out. Um, but I read a book recently recommended to me. It's called Women Who Rose Rooted by Sharon Blackie. And she literally explains that perfectly as, you know, women who are trying to beat this patriarchal system by playing by patriarchal rules. Like they think if they just keep pushing themselves and if they just keep, you know, climbing the corporate ladder and, you know, stripping themselves of their feminine, whether, you know, and seeing that as a bad thing, that's the way to win success and equality and everything. And I mean, and she goes, it simply isn't. Like she found more success and well-being within herself, connecting to what made her feel successful and made her feel grounded in her being and her feminine and in her masculine. And that was for her, that was working the land and connecting back to nature. And I know that's stereotypical feminine, but I'm the same. I feel connected and grounded and safe when I'm out on country, when I'm connecting with the land and, you know, noticing what's happening around me. You know, but she's essentially changing the game. She's changing the rules that she plays by. She's not playing by, you know, she's not trying to fit herself into this corporate square box when she is a creative circle, you know. And again, it's
and she changed her definition of success.
Yes, and I think
because we have a tendency of imposing our definition of success on the people around us.
Yes,
and it's not the same. It looks different.
It's not the same.
It looks different for everybody. First thing people should do if they really want to try to find some balance and find, you know, some harmony is to move away from other people's definitions and find out what they define success as.
Stop trying to measure yourself on someone else's scales.
Like, that's I reckon we finished there, Tay. That's just perfect. Stop trying to measure yourself with someone else's scales. In all ways, that's perfect.
All of the ways. But so it's such a loaded big topic that really goes beyond just a two listed things about what it actually is. Like it feeds into and highlights a lot about what's wrong in our society and culture today. And you know,
it's our black and white view of things. It's our black and white view. You know, I think that's what it comes down to. But I love that. Stop trying to measure yourself with someone else's scales. Poetry.
Should write a fucking book. Watch this space, it's coming. But for now, let's close out this episode. And thank you to everyone who has made it to the end. Hopefully, we're all a bit more enlightened by this episode. But for now, let's talk about a cat. So, as always, remember, curiosity may have killed a few cats, but there is no growth in ignorant bliss. Because that cat...
What did Fluffkins do?
Fluffkins didn't do anything. Fluffkins, I have decided, is just living his best life, doing what he damn well pleases, whether anyone else likes it or not. And if that's
praise Fluffkins.
And if that's shitting outside of the litter box, then
so be it.
I love that for him.
Love it. Absolutely love it. Okay. What are we discussing next week?
What are we discussing? Where is my little...
This is me going off on a tangent, I think.
Under the sea. What are we scared of?
Under the sea, what are we scared of?
That fucking connects. That connects.
I know, in so many ways, because everything does. And didn't we see some beautiful video of whales doing a beautiful Fibonacci sequence in the water just the other day? So this is all going to connect. It's not just going to be, it won't be just what we're scared of, but it'll be a lot about what we're scared of under there and the mythology that goes into our fear of very deep waters.
Yes. Deep water, I'm caught up in the flow.
So we hope we didn't offend anyone, and we hope you will join us next week. If you haven't already subscribed, get on it.
Like, subscribe.
Yep.
We
absolutely.
See you next time.
Bye.
Bye.